Okay, let's get into this. Service to self versus service to others. Third density. This is the third density, and it's about becoming sovereign. And being sovereign means mature and responsible to handle your own emotions so that you have your own authority. So that's what sovereign means, having your own authority. The more we suffer emotionally, the more we are pushed to move out of that suffering. Stress is another word for suffering. So service to others is that we will not or cannot do things at the expense of others. It feels too bad to do that. And service to self means that there is a group of beings or people here that bypass the heart chakra. And so they don't have the capacity to feel bad when they violate someone else's free will. As a matter of fact, they feel more empowered. I think a lot of our politicians and corporations today have chosen the service to self path, which is fine. It's just an expression of the one. But ultimately, to not give our authority or our power away, because then we're depleted of energy, to the service to self, you have to have some kind of wisdom. You have to be balanced. You have to know the difference between what is real and what is counterfeit. And if you don't know, then they seem like they're the same. So to be service to others, and the mistake that I made was I excluded myself. I thought it was all about serving others. And the service to self is all about serving oneself and excluding others. So the decision one makes is based on the self. So once I started including myself and being able to speak my truth without having to take responsibility for other people's emotions, I was able to undo a lot of suffering. A lot of people have shared, or they were generous with the information and how they undid their suffering. And so I did a lot of research and a lot of reading into how other people undid their suffering. So we get to choose in this density. We're in the third density, moving into the fourth. The fourth density is about understanding and about love. The fifth density is about wisdom. And so we do need some wisdom in order to bring into the third density when we make our choice, whether we want to serve self only or we want to serve others. And the goal really is to become one with God, to be more godlike, to be more loving, to be more without stress, to be free of negative emotional suffering. So part of this density is, one, to make that choice, two, to transcend the ego, which is part of second density. The second density was based on survival. The animals had to gather in packs and tribes, and it was all about survival. So here we are with a brain, and we have to move out of the brain. That's the mind in the lower mind. It's bringing up all thoughts, and it's all based on survival. If you research it, what's hidden underneath is that I will die. It makes absolutely no sense with the superficial belief that we're holding on to when we say, oh, you shouldn't have said that. And ultimately, the reason that we believe someone shouldn't have said that is because what lurks for us is actually death. And well, in some ways it is true, because it's the ego that dies, but the ego is seen to be illusory. It's not really real, although the effect of the ego can actually be real. So we are fighting for what appears to be our survival. If someone rejects us, we feel like we'll die. We don't know how we're going to survive. So that's how the emotions react, without the awareness of knowing what's going on. So there really has to be some understanding. The majority of people on the planet, as we transition into fourth density, are choosing the positive polarity, service to others. The negative polarity is the service to self. And both are allowed to exist here. anytime we fight against or push against or resist the service to self groups, we lose more of our power. So there's, to allow them to be as they are without affecting us is one of the keys to not suffer when we're dealing with the service to self beings. And everybody moves through that a different way. So you can't really teach and say, oh, you need to say this or you need to do that. It's an impossibility. Some people need to speak up for themselves, and other people can be quiet and transcend the powerlessness of having other people tell them what to do, and feeling like you have to do it or you'll suffer some kind of consequences. So it is possible to be of service to others, more so when you're empowered, because then you really have something to give back. You have something to share. You have wisdom to share, and experiences that you're actually sharing with others. So you don't really have to do anything at a certain level. You just are being. You're just existing. But if anybody wants an explanation, and it does seem like there needs to be some understanding of why we keep repeating the same stuff, suffering over and over, the insanity of how the mind operates as it subtly tries to manipulate and get its way. How can I get what it is that I want without violating someone else's free will or harming them? And it seems like a conundrum, especially when you're dealing with other people and bosses and people that you work with and the establishment, the system, and everything. So it can be quite challenging, but I like to feel good. So I like the service to self, and I like to feel empowered. I don't like to give my authority away to other people, but I like to stay open to listen. And that understanding took me years to get to. So when you are caring about yourself, that doesn't mean that you're service to self, because you do have to care enough about how you feel in order to move out of suffering, to actually be able to give back, to be service to others. And if you're always giving and you deplete yourself, you'll just be depressed and in bed and you have nothing to give. And if you're always selfish, if it's always about you, then you bypassed the heart and you're choosing a negative experience, service to self, and that's what you chose, and it's your right to choose that. Or you're afraid and you're protecting yourself and you just don't want to get hurt. So ultimately, most people have already picked their polarity on some level of their being, and when we move into the fourth density, there will be a split, and then all the service to others will actually move together and they will be unified, and the service to self will actually split because they're incompatible energies. And so I think it's real important to understand, if you're going to be a positive polarity and be service to others, that you have to include yourself. You have to learn how to say no, and you have to say it with love. You have to speak your truth. You have to get to a place where you're not reacting to out there anymore. You're calm and peaceful, and then you can handle the world, and you're just speaking your truth. Things start out complicated and then they become simple. I remember people used to say to me, Tracy, for God's sake, can't you just keep things simple? And there were so many complex, confusing beliefs that I was holding that it was impossible. I needed to understand why things were confusing. You want to hear something funny? When someone asked me, Trace, how you doing? I couldn't even answer because part of me was doing really shitty and part of me was doing really good. And I also didn't want to burden them and waste their time, yet I really didn't know how to respond. It was just, and some people will just say good, but just to get you out of their hair. So I wasn't really sure what was required of me, how to respond, how to be in the world or anything. And it has moved for me from a place of confusing to very peaceful, loving. I just have a lot of fun in life. I laugh every day, and I do love to share what I've learned, whether it helps people or not. Part of my service to others is to not hoard it to myself, because I did suffer a lot and I had a lot of stress, and I tried to figure out what was going on and I just couldn't make heads or tails. And I just kept persevering, and I ended up understanding a lot of the human psychology. So I love to feel good, and I love to share, and I love to be a part of. And I'm really looking forward to the transition from the third density to the fourth density, where there's love and understanding. And that's how we're going to be living as a collective. So I hope this helped you understand the difference. Oh, and the one more thing. When you come up against service to self, or people that are in pain in general, if you push against, or you try to get them to stop, being angry, you just deplete your own power. So the key to not resisting is allowing. Of course, you don't want to do that if somebody's life is in jeopardy, but to let them be angry, because in order to get to a place of empowerment, we have to move through a lot of anger, because we bought a lot of stuff that wasn't true. And we get to the same truth. The truth isn't one way for one person and another way for another person. I'm not talking about personal preference of truths. I'm talking about the truth. It becomes the same, and that's how we can join in unity. So I hope that helps in your understanding the service to self and service to others, and what exactly is going on in this third density. As challenging and hard as it is, there's an end to the suffering, and it gets less and less the more we take responsibility for our own emotions, because we were innocent when we believed those programs. We were innocent. That's why the Bible says, be ye like little children, because the little children are innocent. We bought all of these negative beliefs through our innocence, not through our guilt. So you can't ever really compensate for guilt, or what did I do that was so wrong. You can just kind of see that it's not true, that we bought these beliefs, and so we have to own that we bought them. And once we own it, then we can make a different choice. Up until that time, we'll just keep reacting. So I can feel the shift in the energies of people. Even being at the hospital recently with Jamie's birth, the personnel, it's just so different. They are very supportive, cooperative, explaining, teaching. There's just a lot of love there. And hospitals just didn't used to be that way. I used to work in one. And so definitely not. A lot of people are changing. They're open. People are moving through their pain. And and so ultimately the big heavy hitters are the service to self, and that's the system. But if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be able to, we would always be slaves, we'd always be powerless. So they're used in this game to get out of our powerlessness, our victim mentality. So anyway, peace to you.